Brandon Marks, a 52-year-old tech millionaire, thought he'd found true love when he married 25-year-old Instagram model Lila Rose. But just 3 months later, his lifeless body was discovered at their luxury Gold Coast home. What seemed like a tragic accident quickly unraveled into a dark web of lies, betrayal, and murder that no one saw coming. Brandon Marks was the kind of man who turned heads when he entered a room. At 52, he had the presence of someone used to being in control, and the bank account to back it up. After founding and selling one of Australia's top cybersecurity firms, he had more money than he could ever spend. His sprawling mansion on the Gold Coast sat right on the water, with floor-to-ceiling glass, imported marble, and its own rooftop helipad. He lived in a world of private jets, exclusive clubs, and designer everything. To most, Brandon seemed to have it all: success, wealth, and the freedom to do whatever he pleased. He'd been married twice before. His first wife had been his college sweetheart. They split after he became too obsessed with work. The second was a high-profile lawyer who'd grown tired of his constant travel. Neither marriage had lasted more than 5 years, and Brandon didn't seem too bothered. He joked to friends that he wasn't built for love, just business. Then came Lila Rose. She was 25 and already a small celebrity on Instagram. Her feed was full of sunny beaches, green smoothies, yoga poses, and luxury getaways. She called herself a wellness entrepreneur, though no one really knew what she did. What was clear was that she was beautiful, knew how to pose for a camera, and lived a lifestyle that many envied. Where Brandon met her at a charity he donated $50,000 0 cents that night. She posted about it the next morning. Within weeks, they were seen everywhere together, jetting off to Bali, Monaco, and St. Bart's. Paparazzi loved them. Brandon played the role of the charming older millionaire Lila, the young starlet with a mysterious past. To some, it looked like a publicity stunt. To others, a real romance. When the wedding was announced just 3 months into their relationship, people were stunned. The ceremony was held on a private island off the coast of Fiji. Only 40 guests attended. Lila wore a custom gown worth over $100,000 0 cents. The photos looked like something out of a magazine. Brandon smiled in every one of them, arms wrapped around his bride. His friends whispered doubts behind his back. Some said Lila was using him. Others believed Brandon was just looking for youth and beauty to fill a void. But no one expected what would happen next. Just 3 months later, Brandon Marks would be dead, found at the bottom of a staircase in the home he had once called his dream. And the dream life he thought he'd created with Lila Rose would unravel into a nightmare. The call to emergency services came just after midnight. Lila Rose's voice trembled as she told the operator her husband had fallen down the stairs. When paramedics arrived at the Gold Coast mansion minutes later, they found Brandon Marks lying face down at the bottom of a wide marble staircase. Blood had pooled beneath his head, and a broken wine glass was scattered across the floor. Lila sat nearby in a silk robe, her hands shaking, her face pale. She kept repeating that it had all happened so fast, that he had tripped and there was nothing she could do. To the untrained eye, it looked like a tragic accident. Brandon had been drinking, the staircase was slick, and the sharp edges of the steps made a fall potentially fatal. The first responders treated it as such, but as the body was examined more closely and details were recorded, small inconsistencies began to appear. Brandon was barefoot, and one of the paramedics quietly noted the lack of defensive wounds or signs that he'd tried to catch himself on the way down. His arms showed no bruising, no broken bones. It was almost as if he had simply collapsed and fallen forward without resistance. The police arrived shortly after, and their initial report echoed the paramedics' assumptions. An unfortunate fall, possibly alcohol. Lila told them they had been watching a movie and sharing a bottle of wine. Brandon had gone upstairs to retrieve something from the bedroom, and the next thing she heard was a loud crash. She said she rushed to the staircase and found him at the bottom. She called for help immediately. Her story was calm, even believable, but something about the scene didn't sit right with the responding officers. Neighbors were interviewed in the days following the incident. One of them, a retired woman who lived 2 houses down, mentioned something strange. She had been up late reading and claimed to have heard loud voices coming from the house shortly before midnight, arguing and what sounded like a man shouting. That detail didn't match the calm evening Lila had described. The autopsy report changed everything. While Brandon's injuries were consistent with a fall, toxicology revealed something unexpected. A heavy concentration of sedatives in his bloodstream, enough to impair his balance and cognition, possibly even enough to render him unconscious. That meant one thing. If he fell, he likely never knew it was happening. The question now wasn't whether Brandon slipped, it was whether he was pushed, or worse, if someone had planned for him to never make it down the stairs alive. Detectives began to peel back the layers of what happened the night Brandon Marks died. The sprawling mansion was equipped with one of the most advanced home security systems money could buy. Multiple indoor and outdoor cameras, motion sensors, and biometric locks. Brandon had installed it himself after selling his cybersecurity firm, proud of the extra layer of protection. But when investigators reviewed the footage from the night of his death, they found something deeply suspicious. Nearly all the interior cameras had been disabled just hours before he died. It wasn't just a glitch. The system's logs showed someone had manually deactivated the cameras in the living room, kitchen, hallway, and stairwell. The only ones still operating were outside, capturing the driveway, backyard, and pool area. Whoever turned the cameras off had known exactly which ones to disable, and the security system required a fingerprint or passcode to make changes. Only 2 people had access, Brandon and Lila. With the interior footage wiped, investigators turned to the outside cameras. At first, there was nothing unusual. Cars came and went throughout the day. Delivery drivers, housekeepers, and a personal trainer. But around 11:02 p.m., a black SUV pulled up to the house. It was a rental car with tinted windows. No one entered through the front door, and the vehicle drove away just 30 minutes later. The visit was never mentioned by Lila in her statement. Detectives traced the rental to a shell identity, an alias tied to a prepaid credit card. But inside the vehicle, when it was eventually located abandoned near Brisbane, they found a single fingerprint on the steering wheel. A forensic match came back a few days later. It belonged to Jason Hale, a name that immediately raised red flags. Jason was 29, with a long history of financial scams, identity theft, and online fraud. Even more disturbing, he was linked to Lila. The background check revealed that Lila and Jason had once lived together in Melbourne. Their relationship ended abruptly when Jason was arrested for defrauding an elderly couple. There was no record of contact between them since then, until now. This wasn't just an old flame showing up out of the blue. Jason's appearance at the house, the deactivated cameras, and the sedatives found in Brandon's system began to form a sinister pattern. What had looked like an accident was quickly transforming into something else entirely, a carefully orchestrated event. The timeline was tightening, and police were beginning to suspect that Brandon's death had been no accident. It was a setup, and Jason Hale might be the key to uncovering the truth. Detectives knew they were onto something big. Jason Hale's sudden reappearance in Lila's orbit, combined with the manipulated security system and Brandon's drugged body, couldn't be coincidence. They began digging into Jason's life, starting with his financial records and recent movements. He had no official address, used burner phones, and worked under multiple aliases. Surveillance footage from nearby gas stations and toll roads confirmed that Jason had been traveling between Brisbane and the Gold Coast in the days leading up to Brandon's death. Investigators obtained a warrant to search Jason's last known hideout, a rented studio apartment tucked behind a rundown commercial building. Inside, they found a treasure trove of evidence: multiple mobile phones, several fake IDs, and printed photos of Brandon and Lila taken from social media were scattered across a cluttered desk. On one whiteboard, investigators found a timeline labeled with key events: wedding, account access, will, and, disturbingly, exit plan. This was no random crime. It was a long game, planned, rehearsed, and executed with precision. The breakthrough came from digital forensics. One of Jason's burner phones still had an active SIM card. Though most of the contents had been wiped, a few files remained. Among them were screenshots of encrypted messages from a hidden messaging app. The contact name was saved as L. The conversation logs spanned weeks. They revealed planning, paranoia, and, most chillingly, anticipation. In one message, sent just days before Brandon's death, L wrote, "He's getting suspicious, we need to act soon." Another read simply, "It's almost done." Investigators now had to prove that L was Lila. That confirmation came through a detail Jason hadn't covered well: photos. In one folder recovered from an encrypted app on his laptop, there were dozens of candid shots of Lila taken in Brandon's home, all time-stamped after the couple had been married. One showed her sitting on the edge of Brandon's pool, texting on a phone with the exact same pink case she used publicly. Another showed her holding a glass of wine in the kitchen, with Jason's reflection barely visible in the stainless steel fridge behind her. The evidence was undeniable. Jason hadn't just visited the house the night Brandon died. He'd been there before, likely multiple times, while Lila was supposedly home alone. The secret relationship between them wasn't just ongoing. It had been reignited with purpose. Police now had a clear motive. Lila and Jason weren't just exes, they were partners. And Brandon Marks, the man who thought he'd married the love of his life, had unknowingly welcomed a predator into his home, and her co-conspirator through the front gate. As the investigation unfolded, the woman known to the world as Lila Rose began to unravel. Police began looking into her background more closely, beyond the glossy Instagram profile and curated lifestyle she portrayed online. What they found shocked even the most seasoned detectives. Lila Rose didn't exist. Her name, her history, her modeling career, it was all fabricated. Her real name was Angela Hayes, born in a small town outside of Perth. She had legally changed her name 5 years earlier after disappearing under suspicion of fraud tied to a luxury goods scheme in Dubai. Angela had reinvented herself on social media, starting from scratch with fake brand endorsements, photo shoots in borrowed clothes, and a relentless effort to project the image of a glamorous influencer. Her Instagram followers had grown steadily over the years, boosted by strategic relationships and paid promotions, but no modeling agency had ever signed her. No legitimate brand had partnered with her. Most of her posts were staged using props, rented locations, or stolen content from other influencers. Further investigation revealed that she had used similar tactics in the past. Before Brandon, there were at least 3 other wealthy men in her life, each with suspicious financial losses and abrupt breakups. One man in Singapore reported that she vanished after he gave her access to a joint bank account. Another in Los Angeles filed a civil suit, claiming she defrauded him out of nearly $300,000, 0 cents. None of the cases had gone to trial. She'd always managed to disappear just in time, leaving no forwarding address or traceable digital footprint. Without the help of forensic analysts, police traced Angela's online activity during her relationship with Brandon. She had created dozens of fake email accounts, used virtual private networks, and even routed some communications through foreign servers. Her Instagram success had served one purpose: to build a believable persona she could use to access people like Brandon. And it worked. She knew what to post, when to post, and how to make her life look effortless and exclusive. Behind the filters, though, was a skilled manipulator who used charm and fantasy to exploit trust. Angela didn't just marry Brandon Marks, she targeted him. His reputation, wealth, and isolation made him the perfect mark. She studied him, learned what he liked, and crafted a version of herself to match. By the time he proposed, he was already deep inside her trap. What the public saw as a whirlwind romance was, in reality, the final phase of a long and calculated con. And Brandon, distracted by love and illusion, never saw it coming. Brandon Marks had always prided himself on being cautious with money. Even after becoming a multimillionaire, he managed his finances with precision. He had teams of advisors, lawyers, and accountants, and he rarely made impulsive decisions. That's why it shocked those close to him when they learned he had transferred over $4 million into a new investment account shared with Lila. Just weeks after their wedding, the account had been set up under the guise of philanthropy. Lila told Brandon she wanted to launch a foundation for underprivileged girls, claiming she had grown up in poverty and wanted to give back. She said the foundation would provide mentorship and scholarships. She showed him a website mock-up, a business plan, and even fabricated emails from supposed non-profit consultants. It looked professional and legitimate. Brandon, touched by her story and eager to support her, agreed to help fund the launch. But investigators quickly discovered that the foundation didn't exist. The business was never registered, and the consultants didn't either. The bank account listed as the charity's fund was actually under the control of a shell company based in Singapore. Tracing the movement of the money, forensic accountants found that it had been withdrawn in increments and funneled into multiple foreign accounts, several linked to Jason Hale's alias. The trail was complicated, but the intention was clear. The foundation was a front to siphon Brandon's wealth. Emails between Brandon and his legal team suggested that he had started to grow suspicious. In one message, he mentioned inconsistencies in the paperwork for the charity. In another, he asked for a full audit of the joint account. He had scheduled a meeting with his personal attorney the week before his death, but abruptly canceled with no explanation. That same week, Lila had asked Brandon to pause any legal inquiries until after they returned from an upcoming trip to New Zealand. Friends said Brandon had started asking questions about Lila's past. He tried to verify her background, asking if anyone knew where she'd gone to school or how she'd gotten her modeling start. According to one friend, Brandon privately admitted he couldn't find a single modeling contract or agency connected to her. He was beginning to see the cracks, but by then it was too late. The marriage wasn't about love, it was a financial operation disguised as romance. Every move Angela Hayes made was calculated to bring her closer to Brandon's fortune. And now that his money was starting to slip from her grasp, the urgency to silence him permanently began to take shape. The investigation took a dramatic turn when Brandon's lawyer came forward with crucial information that had previously gone unnoticed. Just 3 days before Brandon's death, he had contacted his legal team to request an urgent update to his will. In his message, he made it clear. He wanted Lila removed entirely as a beneficiary. Instead, he instructed that all assets be placed into a trust for his 16-year-old daughter from his first marriage. It was a sudden and decisive move, one that showed Brandon no longer trusted the woman he had married just weeks earlier. The lawyer prepared the updated documents immediately. Brandon signed the digital version and arranged for a courier to deliver the hard copy to his home for secure storage. But that physical version never made it into his safe. When detectives searched the house after his death, the new will was missing. The only version they found was the old one, where Lila, under the name Lila Rose Marks, was still listed as the primary beneficiary of nearly all his assets, including the house, investment accounts, and insurance policies. It didn't take long to suspect foul play. The courier company confirmed the document had been successfully delivered to Brandon's address the day before his death. He had signed for it himself. That meant the new will had been in the house when he died. Somewhere along the way, it had vanished. Investigators believed someone had destroyed it. Someone with a lot to lose if the changes were finalized. The timing was too precise to ignore. Brandon had begun cutting Lila out of his life, and within 72 hours, he was dead. His effort to protect his wealth and to redirect his legacy back to his daughter was halted just in time for Lila's benefit. Under the old will, she would inherit nearly everything. Without the updated document, her plan would remain intact. Detectives theorized that Brandon had confronted Lila about the money, the fake charity, or perhaps even her past. Maybe he told her he had changed the will. If he did, that would have been the trigger. With millions of dollars on the line, she couldn't afford to wait. If the new will were to be found or validated, her role as heiress would disappear overnight. Lila had played the long game well, but Brandon's late decision to protect himself had almost stopped her. It was a race against time. And in the end, time ran out for Brandon Marks. His final attempt to escape the trap he had unknowingly walked into had come too late. With mounting evidence and a clearer picture of what had truly happened inside the mansion, police knew they had to act fast. Lila had remained publicly composed in the days following Brandon's death, appearing at the memorial service in a black designer dress, giving brief interviews, and even posting a heartfelt tribute on Instagram. But behind the scenes, she was preparing to run. Investigators placed her under surveillance, suspecting she knew the walls were closing in. Within 48 hours of being questioned a second time, she withdrew nearly $200,000, 0 cents in cash, from multiple bank branches, packed several suitcases, and paid a private driver to take her north toward Queensland's remote outback. She turned off her main phone and used a secondary number to make untraceable calls. Her plan was clear: disappear completely before formal charges could be filed. A nationwide alert was issued, and the search intensified. Meanwhile, Jason Hale had already gone underground. He was tracked to a Brisbane apartment rented under yet another false identity. When police stormed the unit, they found him surrounded by burner phones, hard drives, passports, and over $80,000, 0 cents in cash. The moment he was in custody, the case cracked wide open. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Jason confessed. In a detailed statement, he admitted that the plan had been set in motion nearly a year earlier when Angela Hayes, still using the name Lila, reconnected with him through encrypted messaging apps. She told him she had found the perfect target, a lonely millionaire with a soft spot for younger women and a history of failed relationships. She claimed Brandon was arrogant, vulnerable, and completely in love with her. Together, they constructed the entire plan. Lila would manipulate Brandon into marriage, gain access to his finances, and subtly convince him to transfer large sums into their control. The end goal was always the same: take the money and disappear. When Brandon began asking too many questions, they decided to act. Lila drugged him with sedatives, slipped into his wine, and Jason entered the house through the side gate while the cameras were off. They staged the scene to look like a fall, careful not to leave obvious marks or signs of a struggle. After the confession, police launched a manhunt for Lila. She was found 2 days later at a roadside motel near the Northern Territory border. She had dyed her hair, discarded her phone, and was carrying multiple fake IDs. She offered no resistance when arrested. The fantasy was over. The influencer, the perfect wife, the grieving widow. None of it was real. What had started as a love story had unraveled into one of the most shocking financial murders in recent memory. And now, the truth was out. The courtroom was packed the day Angela Hayes, known to the world as Lila Rose, faced charges of murder, fraud, and conspiracy. The trial quickly became a media frenzy, with headlines calling it the Instagram model murder and the deadly social media scam. Prosecutors laid out the damning evidence piece by piece: the falsified identity, the fake charity, the financial trails, the manipulated home security footage, and the chilling confession from Jason Hale. The defense tried to paint Angela as a troubled young woman who had made mistakes but never intended to kill Brandon Marks. They argued the sedatives found in Brandon's system were for medical reasons and that the fall was a tragic accident. However, the mounting evidence proved impossible to ignore. The timeline of events, the destroyed will, and the precise coordination between Angela and Jason convinced the jury that this was a cold, calculated crime. Witnesses described how Angela had expertly crafted her online persona, using social media to lure wealthy men into her web. Experts testified on the dangers of digital manipulation and identity fraud, highlighting how influencers can create entire fake lives to deceive others. The courtroom became a battleground for truth versus illusion, with every piece of evidence showing how deeply Brandon had been ensnared. Jason Hale pleaded guilty to conspiracy and agreed to testify against Angela. His testimony was detailed and chilling. He described their plans to manipulate Brandon, how Angela used charm and deceit to gain his trust, and the final act when she slipped the sedatives into his drink. He admitted to disabling the cameras and staging the fall, making sure Brandon's death looked like an accident. The prosecution argued that Angela's motive was clear: greed. She saw Brandon's wealth as her ticket to a luxurious lifestyle and had no qualms about destroying him to get it. They also revealed how she tried to flee after the murder, showing a consciousness of guilt. After weeks of testimony and closing arguments, the jury deliberated for less than a day before returning a unanimous guilty verdict. Angela Hayes was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Jason Hale received a reduced sentence in exchange for his cooperation, but was ordered to serve at least 25 years. Brandon Marks's family expressed relief that justice had been served, but mourned the loss of a man who had been betrayed in the worst possible way. The trial became a cautionary tale about the dangers of trusting appearances and the dark side of social media fame. It was a story that would be remembered for years, a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful masks hide the deadliest lies. The aftermath of Brandon Marks' death sent shockwaves through the community, the tech world, and social media circles alike. News outlets dissected the story endlessly, from the luxury mansion on the Gold Coast to the glamorous but deadly relationship that ended in tragedy. The public struggled to reconcile the image of a successful, intelligent man with the reality that he had been so thoroughly deceived. Many were left wondering how someone so cautious and experienced could fall victim to such an elaborate con. The case sparked widespread discussion about the dark side of influencer culture. Angela Hayes, aka Lila Rose, had used the perfect tool for the modern age: social media. She crafted a persona that was aspirational and believable, exploiting the trust people place in online identities. Her story became a grim warning about the dangers of digital deception, where a picture-perfect life can hide manipulation, lies, and even deadly intentions. Brandon's family struggled with the personal aftermath. His daughter, only 16 when her father died, had to grow up fast. She inherited the trust Brandon had set up, but the loss left a deep void. Friends described Brandon as a man who, despite his wealth, was lonely at heart. A man who wanted love, but found only betrayal. They spoke of his kindness, generosity, and how he had tried to start fresh with Lila before everything fell apart. In the tech community, Brandon's story became a reminder that success and intelligence don't make someone immune to human vulnerability. Some of his colleagues established a foundation in his name, focused on helping victims of online fraud and identity theft. They aimed to raise awareness about scams and educate people on how to protect themselves in a world increasingly driven by digital connections. Legal experts also pointed to the case as an example of how quickly technology can be weaponized. The manipulation of home security systems, fake online personas, and encrypted communications were all tools used to commit a crime that would have been much harder to pull off just a decade earlier. It challenged lawmakers and law enforcement to adapt to new realities and develop better ways to detect and prevent such crimes. Years later, the story of Brandon Marks and Lila Rose remained a chilling example of how love can be a deadly trap. It was a story told over and over, on podcasts, documentaries, and news specials, serving as a stark reminder that sometimes the greatest danger hides behind the most dazzling smile, and that in the digital age, truth can be stranger, darker, and more dangerous than fiction.